Good morning, Dolphins fans. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Also, check out our segment with Rebecca Toback previewing the Bengals sideline. She had a lot of interesting things to say about where the Bengals are now and also about former Dolphins interim defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, who is the Bengals defensive coordinator now. So the Dolphins and Bengals have been just swapping defensive coordinators, it seems, over the last couple of years. Glad that that's not the case anymore. But Paul, the Dolphins play the 2-8-1 Bengals here. If the season ended today, the Bengals would pick third. But when I looked at this game back in week 5 or week 6, I thought, man, this could be a tough win for the Dolphins. You know, Joe Burrow was looking like offensive rookie of the year. They had Joe Mixon at running back. They had AJ Green coming back. Carlos Dunlap at defensive end. They signed DJ Reader and Trey Waynes in the offseason to big money on defense. All those players I mentioned are out except for AJ Green. So Dolphins are 11.5-point favorites here. Biggest line for the Dolphins as a favorite since week 1 of 2003.
Yeah, and I think everybody 3 months ago, really since the schedule came out, was eyeballing this as the big Tua versus Joe Burrow matchup. I mean, regardless of what happened the rest of the year, that was the thing that a lot of folks were looking at here. We'd be remiss to not say that was the biggest thing. Burrow, very obviously out, might not even be back to start the season next year. Tua, maybe out, maybe not. I guess we're playing maybe with the Bengals with our quarterback position.
Yeah, that's it. And Tua is supposedly going to be a game time decision here. And man, I really hope he does start. And the reason for that is because I think this is a game, regardless of who's at quarterback for the Dolphins, they should win, as the line reflects. And you know what the storyline is going to be if the Dolphins win this game convincingly, which we expect them to, and put up a lot of points on offense. And then next week, you play the Kansas City Chiefs. And is that really the game that you want to throw Tua back into? I mean, it would be an unbelievable check mark on his resume for Tua if he came back next week, went up against Patrick Mahomes, and the Dolphins pulled the upset over the Chiefs. But not really a situation I want Tua to be in. So I do hope he starts this game.
Yeah, I'd rather he knocks the rust off in this one. And this is a weird game. It's kind of like when you're a kid, right? You're going into this game as the bully, and you're the biggest kid in the class. In this game. And if you get in a fight with another kid, say the smallest kid in the class, if you hit him and knock him out, no one's going to say good things. But if he hits you and knocks you out, everybody's going to be talking about it. And that's really what this game equates to, especially with Burrow out, Mixon out. Hell, we've talked a little bit offline about this, and I know some people are going to think I'm silly, but with their long snapper, who's one of the better ones in the game, out, or potentially out, questionable. Their return specialist that set the record for a kickoff return for a touchdown last week, he's questionable. You start looking down this roster, and even AJ Green doesn't strike the fear anymore. T. Higgins as a rookie looks great, and then Tyler Boyd looks great. Outside of that, Giovanni Bernard looks like Giovanni Bernard.
Yeah, and to go back to your analogy, when I was in grade school and I was beating up a younger kid, I'm just kidding.
That's when the show went from good to great.
That's I was kidding.
What's that, Joe Jackson?
Oh man, no, but you're right. It's this is a game that it's a game that always scares me too, and it was the same way with the Jets last week. I was terrified heading into that game because the Jets had played their previous two opponents, the Patriots and the Chargers, really close, and I still think the Jets are not going to go 0-16. So I thought when that first drive, when the Jets started marching right down the field, I was like, uh-oh. But obviously they came back, won the game 20-3. So But this again, like you said, it's a game that it doesn't say a lot if the Dolphins win. But at this point of year, we're not looking for style points. Going to 8-4 sets you up in good position to make the playoffs, to go 2-2 in the final 4 games. And I do think that if the Dolphins win 10 games this year, I've kind of changed my tune from last week. I think if the Dolphins win 10 games, that they're probably going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, the most critical game in that stretch, not to look ahead, it is not the Buffalo game, not the Patriots game, not the Chiefs game, not even this game. The most critical game is the game the NFL moved to Saturday, December 26th, the day after Christmas at 8 p.m. in prime time. The game against the Raiders, because yes, Miami can still take the division, especially if they win in Week 17. But to make the playoffs, their closest contention right now, at least as far as the wild card spot goes, is against the Raiders. So that's if there's any of these games that Miami has to win, if they're going to win 2 or 3 of them here, the Raiders is a huge one.
That's for sure. And I would even go a step further. I'd say that, well, first of all, if the Dolphins don't beat the Bengals this week, then it's kind of a moot point. I don't expect them to, go even 2-2 in the final 4 games. But to me, from that point, if you beat the Patriots and the Raiders, even if you lose to the Chiefs and the Bills, I think they end up making the playoffs. And the reason I say that is because, yeah, right now, I mean, you've got the 4 division leaders, and that's probably not going to change. You got the Steelers, you got the Chiefs, Titans, and Bills. Maybe the Dolphins knock them off the last week and win the division. Well, but as far as the playoffs, you got those 4 teams. They're in. They're going to make the playoffs. Then you've got the Browns as the 5th seed. Even though I think they're kind of a fraud, they've got the Jets and Giants on their schedule. They're going to get to 10 wins. Then you got the Dolphins at the 6th seed, the Colts at the 7th seed, Ravens 8th, Raiders 9th right now. And the Ravens have, if they get Lamar Jackson back, they've got a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. So they're probably going to end up getting to 10 wins as well. But the reason I say that is because if there's a scenario where the Dolphins and Raiders are tied for the playoff spot, if they beat the Raiders and the Patriots, they're going to end up with the tiebreaker over the Ravens because they're going to have a better conference record than them. So that's why I keep going back to the Patriots and the Raiders game.
Well,
you've got to win those two.
And one thing to point out here too, when it comes to the Ravens right now, is the Ravens are reeling. I mean, we just watched their game get moved from the every day to one day to the next day to the next day. I think it got bumped 3-4 times this past week. They played Wednesday afternoon football, and they're in even worse shape now than they were going into that game. Going into, I think they play Monday night this week. Their schedule just got tossed in a Yahtzee cup and thrown everywhere. But their quarterback room right now looks like our running back room. They have, I think it's Trace McSorley is the only active, healthy, non-COVID riddled quarterback on their roster. They are one step shy of having to do what the Bengals did or what the Broncos did this past week and go trotting some practice squad running back out at quarterback. So that's something to watch. And they were struggling before this happened. So that's an interesting team to even be in the playoff conversation right now.
It is. And if the Ravens had even a couple of tough games coming up here the rest of the year, I would say that them and the Raiders would be the teams I'm predicting to be out of the playoffs. But you look at the NFL draft now, number one, you've got first pick belongs to the Jets. Second is the Jaguars. Third is the Bengals. Fourth is the Cowboys. The Ravens play 3 of those 4 teams in the last 5 weeks of the season. They've got Dallas on Tuesday. They play at Cleveland, which could be a tough game. But even if they lose that, they've still got the Jaguars, Giants, and Bengals to end the season. So that could be 10 wins right there. So that's why I think that the Dolphins need to win not only this weekend's game, but Patriots and Raiders too. They've absolutely got to do it. I don't think they're getting in at 9-7.
Well, to quote Al Davis, just win, baby. Just win.
Just win. That's all that matters. And You mentioned before T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd at wide receiver. Yeah, that is by far the biggest strength of their team right now because without him, I mean, you've got Brandon Allen taking over a quarterback. He was terrible last week against the Giants. He was 17 for 29 for 136 yards and an interception against a defense that wasn't good. Well, you're going to face a great defense this week. And the Dolphins numbers just keep getting better on the defensive side of the ball. They're first and third down defense. They are fourth in quarterback rating for opposing quarterbacks, fourth in completion percentage, and I believe second in points allowed. So they're check marking every box on the defensive side of the ball. And some of the bad quarterbacks they faced this year, it's been a nightmare for them against the Dolphins defense.
It has, and Miami or the Bengals offensive line is patchworked. I believe Shaq Calhoun starts on that line, doesn't he?
If not, he might be starting this one because Alex Redmond is going to be out. But I lose track of those interior linemen for the Bengals. Billy Price, Alex Redmond, they're all terrible. But yeah, Shaq Lawson may start this game, or Shaq Calhoun may start this game for the Bengals at right guard.
Well, and God, this who's who coaching staff that they have up there in frickin' Cincinnati of Dolphins ex coaches. Am I correct that Jim Turner is still their offensive line coach right now?
Jim Turner's their offensive line coach. Lou Anarumo is their defensive coordinator, and Zach Taylor is their head coach. And
because he might as well trot his blow up doll out to play line the way that they've been playing.
Yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to get into a blow up doll story on the show, but just go just Google Jim Turner blow up doll. You'll know the rest of the story.
Yeah, it was a meathead thing for him to do. We could have a whole show on why that was a stupid reason for him to get fired, but he was still a bad offensive line coach. Let's be honest about that.
He took a decent or an okayish offensive line and made him worse. And he doesn't have nearly the players there that he did here. And I'm not saying he had great players here. And you've got really a Miami pass rush that confuses opposing offenses. Don't worry, Marino's goat. We're going to touch on the running back room. And on top of that, you've got a secondary that's just destroying opponents right now. You've got Byron Jones, who may not have an interception this year, but he's forcing opposing quarterbacks to throw at Xavier Howard, which is hilarious. Turning out great for us. And then you've got Bobby McCain, Eric Rowe, and Brandon Jones back there playing lights out at safety, coming up, blitzing the quarterback, doing all kinds of special things and taking away threats. And then Nick Needham, who you and I both talked about at great length, has really stepped up his game once he settled in at that slot corner. So you're really not going up against Miami's weakness with your only remaining strength in the passing game.
That's exactly right. And Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins both have over 700 yards receiving each. A lot of that was with Joe Burrow. T. Higgins led the Bengals last week with 44 yards receiving. He's a heck of a player. The only way I could see the Bengals doing anything on offense is if Giovanni Bernard gets going, and I don't see that happening. I mean, not only do the Bengals abandon the run early, but also this year he's averaging 3.4 yards a carry. Last year he averaged 3.2 yards a carry. I can't believe this guy has been on the Bengals for 8 years as a backup. He's like Bilal Powell for the Jets. Like, if you're not good, how do you survive as a running back, a backup running back on a team for 8 years? It's bizarre to me. But Paul, as it was alluded to in the chat room there, the Dolphins have some of their own issues there at running back. So Dwayne Washington returned to practice yesterday, was limited, but he's doubtful for the game. Doesn't look like he's going to play. Savon Ahmed is unlikely to, or is already out. He's not going to play. Myles Gaskin, still on injured reserve, could get activated, and I think he needs to get activated in this game because otherwise the Dolphins, after Matt Breida's out with COVID now, if you don't get Myles Gaskin activated, you may be going into that game with Patrick Laird and Malcolm Brown at running, or excuse me, Malcolm Perry at running back.
Yeah, and Lynn Bowden as well.
Yeah.
It's but that being said, I almost love it. You're playing against a team with no pass rush. So long as you don't throw against Jesse Bates in the middle of that deep center field, you can really throw against these guys, and you have the time to do so. So if Miami's got a bunch of screen pass catching running backs, I would love if Tua plays because their running game may turn into a bunch of short screens, and he really may get the opportunity to open up the playbook because he can turn to hand it off, and he's going to be looking at air because there's no one there to do that. So I actually really hope Tua starts even more given the injuries to the running back room.
Yeah, the Bengals pass defense has been pretty good the last 2 weeks, but they faced Alex Smith and Daniel Jones too. I mean, Daniel Jones quarterback rating of 77.1, Alex Smith 83.1. Only one touchdown allowed in the last 2 weeks, but you look before that. We got Ben Roethlisberger had 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. Tannehill had 2 touchdowns and an interception. Baker Mayfield had 5 touchdowns and an interception, and Philip Rivers 3 touchdowns and an interception. So it's pretty clear that when the Bengals face even a halfway decent quarterback, they're not great against the pass. So allowing a quarterback rating of 93.7. But the bigger news on that though, Paul, is when we talked to Rebecca Toback, she said that if possible, the Bengals defensive line and pass rush might even be worse than their offensive line this year.
Yeah, it's Daniel Jones has been hit at an alarming rate for the Giants. Yet when they trotted him out on the field, he practically went untouched all game. And I don't care who the quarterback is. If you give an NFL caliber quarterback all day to throw a football and find an open receiver, for one, you're going to get a receiver shake free eventually in that secondary with all that time in the world. For two, if he can throw passes unharassed, you're basically just out on a practice field chucking to a receiver against air, which you and I both have said before. I don't care what the guy looks like against air, but in this game, I kind of do.
Yeah, I think that Tua will have some time to throw if or Fitzpatrick, whoever starts a quarterback. When it comes to Tua, if he does get the start, even if the pass rush isn't severe, which I don't expect it to be, then but I still want the ball to come out of his hands quickly, because that was the problem against Denver, especially when I looked at the all 22. Is you can't throw the ball only when a receiver is wide open. If you do that, you're going to take sacks. The ball's not going to come out of your hands quickly. I expect Tua to improve in that area, especially with Ryan Fitzpatrick barking in his ear, who's a master at getting the ball out of his hands quickly. So we'll see what happens on that. At wide receiver, you're going to see Devante Parker going up likely against William Jackson all game. William Jackson he's been a good first round pick, but he's been a little bit hit and miss this year. And body type wise, Parker and William Jackson match up very well together. They're kind of, William Jackson is a 6'2" athlete at cornerback, a little bit high cut. So body type wise, I mean, Parker's a much better player than Jackson is at cornerback, but body wise, they do match up well.
Yeah, but that's not going to matter when there's a huge gap between the two of them. And really, I want to see Gesicki uh, do some racing in this one and see Jakeem finally get a little bit more involved, which I know with Fitz at quarterback is probably not going to happen. But I really want to see Jakeem get that opportunity for some yards after the catch in this one. Now, one thing too with Devante Parker, there have been rumors that the Dolphins have been lining him up in the slot a little bit this week to start creating some mismatches. What do you think on that, Cap?
I think it's a good idea to move Parker around, even though the slot probably isn't his best position, because you need to be a little bit more unpredictable on offense. I mean, I know they want to play really conservatively when it's a game against the Bengals or a game against the Jets, but To me, in the third quarter, that was just a mess on offense last week. And it was a game that, in my opinion, had the Dolphins been playing one of 25 to 27 other teams in the NFL, they may have lost with the way they played in the third quarter. Yeah, the defense was dominant, but the offense fumbled the ball twice. It was either fumbling the ball or going 3 and out for almost two straight quarters. And I think the lack of uh, versatility on the offense hurt a lot with that. And it was almost like last week in the Jets game, Chan Gailey, who's 67 or 68 years old, who's been coaching for longer than we've been alive, figured out like, hey, if you use a wide receiver in motion, it frees things up in the middle of the field. And that's what they've got to do here. You've got to constantly be using Jakeem Grant, Lynn Bowden, Malcolm Perry in motion to keep things a little bit more unpredictable. I don't know if that answered your question, but I
No, it
mean,
does. It does a bit. I mean, and I keep going back. God, 3 weeks now. I'm blanking on the opponent to when Jakeem Grant got used correctly for the first time
it's the
since Miami
Rams.
drafted him. They put him in motion. They had him reverse out of his motion. Uh, I believe they tossed him an end around or two, and suddenly it opened up the entirety of the offense in that game. Now, one thing I was thinking about here, Kat, Patrick, one carry, one fumble. That's it, layered for last week. Is our only healthy actual running back in this game. Malcolm Perry, Lynn Bowden Jr., short yardage, goal to go from the 1, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. I don't trust any of them.
No,
You
I
know,
don't either. I don't, and that's
but
and that. Now go ahead.
you know who I do trust in that scenario? The big fat guy that can jump over people, Christian Wilkins.
So what are you saying?
Put Christian Wilkins at the up fullback, and occasionally, if you get into that 3rd and 1, 4th and goal from the 1, I want to see the ball in Christian Wilkins' hands, believe it or not.
I mean, that's fine. Whether he's in the
Hate
backfield,
it all you
whether
want.
I don't hate it. Look, I on a 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 at goal line, I'm all for putting Solomon Kindley at fullback or Christian Wilkins. Kindley is iffy for this game. I actually hope that they don't play him.
Yeah.
That I think at right guard the Dolphins are still going to be fine. Geno Atkins is one of their remaining good players on defense, but he's not what he used to be either. So yeah, not a lot of threats for the Bengals. I mean, other than like I said, other than Carl Lawson, the Bengals don't have anybody on their roster with over one sack. Carl Lawson has 4.5. Second is Sam Hubbard, Logan Wilson, and a bunch of other guys with one. Carlos Dunlap, that was a nightmare for the Bengals earlier this year. Rebecca Toback talked about that, and it was heartbreaking for a lot of Bengals fans to see that in addition to everything else that's happened. So, yeah, I mean, I hope they do get Myles Gaskin back. I typically it wouldn't matter that much, and maybe it won't if they don't get him back. But I mean, I don't. It's never good if you flat out can't run the ball for 4 quarters.
It's not. And, one thing I want to touch on here, too, is I mentioned it earlier in the show. Their long snapper, Clark Harris, is probably going to be out in this game. And while normally that's not a huge deal, there's a couple of factors here. For one, anytime you're dealing with a backup long snapper off the street, you're always looking for that bad snap. And Miami has shown this year, I believe the one mishandled snap from a punt got blocked by Andrew Van Ginkel and turned into a touchdown. Um, it's and on top of that, Clark Harris has done a beautiful job on the Bengals' 2 fake punts this year of that snap at an angle to the up back, and then getting out and blocking. That play, while it's a kind of standard play for a fake punt, is still not the easiest snap in the world, let alone to mask it. So that could be critical for the Bengals here, as well as the fact that you don't know what you've got. Your backup's long snapper could be chucking it over somebody's head, putting it where they don't like. It could affect your field goal unit. And really, Miami has shown this year that their special teams is one of the top units in the league, and it really helps control field position. So Harris being out potentially, and then I'm blanking on the return man's name, but his
Brandon
option
Wilson.
be okay. So Wilson being out, that helps Miami even more control the field position battle. That's part of why you see some of the statistics that you do this year, where opposing teams are just raking up yardage and Miami's not. Guess what? We get a short field most of the time, and we're pinning them inside the 10. Matt Hawk is leading Pro Bowl voting now at the punter position. So their special teams losing two of their best players in this game is really what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, and you look at the last or when the Dolphins played the Bengals in 2018, Jakeem Grant takes one to the house on a punt return and puts the Dolphins up. And what's funny is Paul messaged me during the week, and we were talking about the injuries and other things on the game, and he said to keep an eye on Clark Harris, their long snapper, and because he might be out. And I said, you want me to keep my eye on a long snapper? But as I started thinking about it, I was like, the Bengals are going to be punting a lot. And the one time, like you said, that there was a messed up snap, it was blocked. And the Dolphins have gotten close on a couple of other blocks. So if that could be an issue with that, and with field goal holding too. Randy Bullock, their kicker, I believe missed an extra point and a field goal last week. I don't know what that had to do with the snapping, but that's more field goals than Jason Sanders has missed all year. So, but speaking of that 2018 Bengals game, it was one of the most heartbreaking losses I've ever experienced as a Dolphins fan. And the reason I say that is that year they started off 3-0. They got pasted by the Patriots, and then the next week they're up 17-0 in the middle of the third quarter. Looks like we're going to go 4-1, and then it's an absolute collapse in the fourth quarter. But the reason I bring that up too is because the Bengals' last road victory was 1 week before that. Think about that. So you look at they are 0-18-1 on the road in their last 19 games. So everything is lining up here for the Dolphins to take this game, and they've got to take this game. They've got to get to 8-4.
Well, to be fair, just in honor of the Bengals game, I don't know if you saw what jersey I have on this week, but Mr. Walk-Off Sack that it took Miami by storm and actually kicked off my time on the show with you.
That's right. That was on. I remember that game well. Walk-off sack by Cameron Wake on Halloween in 2013, and that was right in the middle. I think that was a week after the whole Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito situation. Yeah, so I do. I remember that week really well. A lot went on that week. Going back to the game here, as I mentioned before, when the Dolphins face a quarterback that frankly is not good, rarely does that quarterback rise up and take down the Dolphins defense. People might say Drew Lock did a few weeks ago. I don't see it that way. I thought the Broncos did a great job running the ball, had 166 yards from Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay. Drew Lock threw largely a bunch of dump-off passes. He threw for 270 yards, but 61 of them came on the last play of the game when he was just trying to heave the ball up, and it went to Tim Patrick. But you've had the five, really, I'd say, below average quarterbacks they faced this year. Gardner Minshew, quarterback rating is 79. Jimmy Garoppolo, who's playing on one leg, 46.3. Joe Flacco, 50. Drew Lock, 75.7. Sam Darnold, 51. I think Brandon Allen is worse than all these guys. And so, like you said, their one strength of T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd goes right into the teeth of what the Dolphins are good at, and that's Byron Jones and Xavier Howard on the outside. So I don't see these guys getting open. It'll be I mean, the Dolphins would have to come out flat on defense for the Bengals to have any success on offense.
They would, and in all honesty, I want to see Miami in that psycho defense all game. Call it amoeba, call it psycho, call it what you want. The drunk defense. I don't see Brandon Allen doing a great job recognizing coverages if Miami just comes out and lines up. I don't see Brandon Allen doing a great job recognizing blitz if Miami just lines up. And if Miami is moving around before the snap and you don't know who's coming, who's dropping, etc., Brandon Allen's going to hit 6 Dolphins in the chest if Miami does that.
Yeah, I see a big week. I've been saying it the last few weeks for Emmanuel Ogba. Even though Ogba didn't have a sack last week against Connor McDermott, their Jets' third string right tackle, when Darnold dropped back, I always thought he was aware of where Ogba was, and that matters, and I think it'll matter this week too, because Ogba's going up against Bobby Hart, and again, when we had Rebecca Toback on here, we were talking about the offensive line. Before I could even get the name Bobby Hart out, she grimaced. So they re-signed him they signed him to a 3-year, like $20 million contract a few years ago, and he's always been terrible. So hopefully Ogba gets some pressure on here in this game.
Yeah, I think he will, and I think he may not get a huge amount of pressure in the first quarter, as I think they're going to be paying attention to him and chipping with a running back. But here's where that gets fun for me, is I think over the course of the game they're going to shift their attention away from Ogba. I think Landon Roberts, Jerome Baker, Kamal Grugier-Hill, and random players from the secondary. I hate to put it that way, but anybody that's watched the Dolphins defense this year knows exactly what I mean, because Bobby McCain, Brandon Jones, etc. And Andrew Van Ginkel, actually, sorry, with the linebacker / edge core. They're going to be coming randomly from different angles, through different lanes, and I think they're going to get to Brandon Allen early and often with those blitzes, because that offensive line and Jim Turner are not imaginative and do not play well against a straight-up defense, let alone not knowing who's coming from where. And in that instance, I think as they start to try to pay attention to that and try to figure out who's coming and who's not, that's the point I see Ogba uncorking. As the Bengals get further down, he can pin his ears back, and they can't pay attention to him.
Yeah, I like what you said there, and I agree that they should be creative and rotating who they blitz. And I think that's what's going to happen in this one, because when you look at how the Dolphins played Jared Goff, for example, they pretty much brought the house on every play. And it worked, because it takes Goff a while to get rid of the football, and he needs to go through his progressions. They played that perfectly. When they played against Gardner Minshew and Sam Darnold and Joe Flacco, I don't think they brought the house that often. And I'm glad that they didn't, because when you look at Brandon Allen, they do have talent at the wide receiver position. Bringing the house and dumping the ball over the house that they're bringing is, to me, the only way Brandon Allen has a chance to complete long passes. So I hope that they get creative, bring 4 and 5 instead of bringing 6 or 7 on blitzes. And I think that's what they're going to do here in this game. Paul, before we get to our bold prediction and our score prediction here, has anything jumped out there from the chat?
Not really. It's the KC Fanatic just brought up the Halloween night walk-off sack by Wake, but no, Ogba's going to have a good day. A lot of people are feeling good about us winning this game. And you know, I'm seeing a few folks that are excited about the fact that people are talking good about Matt Hawk this year instead of, old Shanks a lot, as he was known the past few years. So, all good stuff, man. It's somebody did ask who we think that the Dolphins will get with the Texans pick, though.
Yeah, and I'm glad that was brought up too, because right now the Dolphins would pick 11th, and with the Texans pick, I'd love for that to be higher. And the Texans may be in more of a world of hurt here in the upcoming weeks, because they play the Colts twice and they play at Chicago, and now they're going to do it without Will Fuller, who is out the rest of the year with PEDs. Same thing for Bradley Roby, who's by far their best cornerback. So, I mean, 4-7 could fall to 4-10 real quick. And now the Dolphins are picking in the top 7 or 8 again, instead of picking 11th right now. But to answer your question here, I'm still looking, making my way through these draft picks. And one player that is not a need there, but could I could see be appetizing for the Dolphins is Miami Hurricane Gregory Rousseau. Now he's a defensive end. There's not a big need at defensive end, but they could have an amazing rotation with Agba, Lawson, Rousseau at D end, and at defensive tackle, Raekwon Davis, Zach Sealer, and Christian Wilkins. They could rotate effectively those six guys all day. And I mentioned Rousseau because um, he's the type of pass rusher that works in this Brian Flores, Bill Belichick style defense. He can win from the inside. He's not somebody who fires off the edge like a Cameron Wake or Robert Quinn did. That doesn't really work in this type of defense. So Gregory Rousseau is one that I think could be a great value pick there early. I want the Dolphins to go best player available with that Texans pick, regardless of who it is.
Yeah, and Kat, I'm glad you brought up the fact that Miami could really end up picking anywhere from like 6th to 12th with this pick. The earlier the pick is, the more chance I think Miami has at Micah Parsons. Linebacker is going to be a huge need, and he will probably be BPA as well at that point in time. As it slides back, two guys that I keep my eye on, Kwity Paye, the edge rusher slash defensive end, would be a perfect fit in this Flores defense. And then, again, this one's not the biggest need on the planet, and it might upset some people if Miami did this. But if that pick were to stay in that 11-12 range, I would not hate if Miami were to take Kyle Pitts, the tight end. Suddenly you basically really relegate Mike Gesicki to that big slot movement guy, and then you've got a complete tight end in Kyle Pitts that can take over a game as well. And now your needs at receiver aren't so huge either by going tight end in round one, which I don't normally love, but I think Pitts is a difference maker enough at tight end that pairing with Shaheen behind him is going to be ugly for opposing defenses next year and really help Tua's growth.
Yeah, Pitts, he's a special player. I mean, he's 6'6", 250 pounds. I don't, again, like Gesicki, I don't consider him a tight end. I don't want him with his hand in the ground. I want him out there being a mismatch. I wonder if there is room enough on the offense for Gesicki and Pitts, but there could be. And one caveat to what you said, if Pitts is the best player on the board at that time and he is a selection, I don't want Chan Gailey here next year, period. In fact, I probably don't want him here next year anyway, but I really don't want him here because I don't trust him to take a use of that to take advantage of that creativity that's needed to get Gesicki and Pitts on the field and playing at a high level.
Yeah, and I'll go one step further because you hit a little bit on what I thought as well. If you've got two dynamic players, I don't give a damn what position it's at. And you can't sit there at the highest level in football and figure out a way to involve both of them. I don't care if it's running backs, maybe maybe quarterback is the only position I'd say that at, but you got dynamic wide receivers, you've got dynamic tight ends, you've got too many good players. You figure out how to get them on the goddamn field. Anybody that can't, I don't want them here. I don't care if it's Chan Gailey. I don't care. And it'll make me question Flores if he brings in an offensive coordinator that can't figure out how to get the two of them on the field.
Yeah, you're exactly right on that. And another, with the other first round pick, again, we're getting way too ahead of ourselves. I'm not a big proponent of drafting running backs in the first round. A lot of people who watch the show know that. Najee Harris is intriguing to me very simply because with Tua, you pair him with his college running back, so they've got some rapport built up already. He's 6'2", 230, and I think he could absorb a lot of that attention here over the next couple of years. And I think that'll be big for Tua because having, Patrick Laird or Myles Gaskin or Matt Breida in the backfield that defenses don't really have to account for, I think is going to hurt Tua the rest of the year. So I'd like to see them really get serious about the running back position. But staying on that game there, Paul, a question I asked on Twitter, and I'll throw the same thing to you. If you had your choice, would you rather have – so the Colts and Texans play 2 of the next 3 weeks, okay?
Yep.
If you had the choice of the Colts sweeping that series or the Texans sweeping that series? Which would you prefer?
Right now, I would say the Colts. And here's my thought process here. Miami controls their own destiny. I want to make the playoffs, but I don't want to make the playoffs based on like, oh, if all these guys lose, you know, it doesn't matter what we do. That's a sissy mentality to go with. It's I I want Miami to make a statement on their way to the playoffs. Don't forget last year with a far inferior roster against some pretty good teams, Brian Flores had these guys playing their best football of the year in December. So I want Miami to do that again this year. I want them to win at least 3 of the next 5 games, and
Yeah,
and
and they
and, and really make their own statement, make their own way. I'd rather they pay their own way than have somebody do it for them.
Yeah, and they have to win 3 of the next 5 games, and I do think there's room in the playoffs for the Colts and Dolphins. The Ravens and Raiders would have to be out in that scenario, which is very possible. I do think you have to win 10 games. People have asked me after the Jets game, have you changed your prediction that the Dolphins go 9-7? And unfortunately, I have to say no at this point because nothing that happened in the Jets game changed how I thought. I think they'll beat the Bengals. I think they'll lose to the Chiefs. I think they will split against the Patriots and the Raiders, and you've got to win both of those. And then the last game of the year, it would come down to that, and I've got to give the advantage to Buffalo. So I'm still at 9-7. I'm still at them missing the playoffs, but still a winning season. And hey, they can beat the Patriots and the Raiders. I just am not predicting them to do that right now.
Yeah, I think they win at least 3 games down the stretch here. I think they finish the year at least 3-2, and I think they do go to the playoffs this year. What happens from there? You know what? Defense wins in the playoffs, and hopefully we get Tua back in time that he gets a chance to develop before the playoffs. Because I can't remember if it was talking to you, talking to somebody else. Fitzpatrick is good enough to get you there. Fitzpatrick is not good enough to win it all. Maybe the defense and special teams does it, but Tua, if he can develop, has the skills to be able to maybe do something special in the playoffs and get a little bit of magic there. So
Yeah, I could see the Dolphins if they get into the playoffs, that defense really cranking it up and causing some problems. If the season had, if playoffs started today, the Dolphins would play at Tennessee against Ryan Tannehill, which would be an incredible thing to watch. I actually think the Dolphins would match up well with them because I think Henry really has to get going. They've got to work off that play action, and like with Jared Goff, when things aren't in rhythm for the Titans, they can be thrown off. And their defense hasn't played as well this year, so yeah, it could be. I also think too that if they get the 7th seed and the Chiefs are 2, and you go to Kansas City, I think that game's going to be a problem. But that's more to do with the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are by far the best team in the league, even with the Steelers. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens here. But you're what you said there, Paul. The Colts winning or sweeping the series. That's the preference for about 80% of people on the poll too, to get that higher draft pick as well. So we've been bouncing all around here. What is your bold prediction for this game for the Dolphins?
whew. Well, first, it's for all our listeners out there. Make sure you're clicking like, make sure you're subscribing and sharing this out to folks. It's we appreciate all you that have been here this year. For my bold prediction, though, God, I've got a lot of them, and I'm trying to pick one. I mean, I thought about the fact that I think the special team is going to score, but I'm going to skip that. I think I think Miami gets 6 turnovers in this game. Going one up on my previous, and people thought I was nuts with one of my previous times I said that, and they had 4 in the first half. I think they put the Bengals in position they have to throw. I think they can identify coverages, and it's once the defense can pin their ears back and get after Brandon Allen, it's just going to be ugly, and yeah,
I think the Bengals. The reason I don't think they're going to turn the ball over that much is I don't think they're going to put the ball in harm's way enough. I think they're going to. I think they're going to be running the ball in the fourth quarter, as opposed to just chucking the ball in the air. But Either way, it's going to be ugly, I think, toward the end of the game. And there's no excuse for it not to be ugly. This right to me is the worst team in the league now that Joe
Yeah,
Burrow and Joe Mixon and all the injuries that they have. I mean, like you mentioned their kick returner, Howard Wilson, or Brandon Wilson. I keep getting that name confused. I don't even know if that's his name, honestly. But
it is.
good. I accidentally guessed right. But Bengals scored 17 points last week and just lost by 2. And people think, oh, that's not too bad. Well, 7 of them came on a kick return, which hardly ever happens in the NFL unless it's Jakeem Grant. So, but anyway, my bold prediction here, I'm going to say that let's do a little bit of a weird one. Brandon Jones, the safety, had his first sack last week in the NFL. I think he gets his first interception this week against Brandon Allen, and that would do a lot for him because he's becoming a bigger piece of this defense as we continue to go along. As far as my score prediction here, I think the game is going to go pretty similar to how it was last week against the Jets. I'm going to say that the Dolphins clamp down offensively. I think they kick a lot of field goals. Overall, I'm going to go 19-6 Dolphins here.
I think, given the issues in the running back room and the way you have to utilize these guys for this game, I think Miami is throwing in the fourth quarter here. And I think it gets very ugly. I think, this, like I said before, I think the special team scores in this one. And I think we see a lot of turnovers, putting Miami in very advantageous field position. And I don't see the Bengals being able to dig themselves out. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go big in this one because, like you said, this right now is the worst team in the league. I'm going 42-7. I think T. Higgins gets away on one play, and outside of that, I think Miami feasts in this one, and it gets ugly. I think they score on all 3 facets of the game in this one. To be honest with you,
Well, I expect that score prediction if you have 6 turnovers and a special teams touchdown, and
yeah.
on that, and throwing in the fourth quarter. So it'd be nice. It's that. Dolphins have blown out opponents this year
Who dat?
quite frequently. So it may not matter. That's going to do it for our breakdown of the Dolphins Bengals matchup here. Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern time at Hard Rock Stadium. The Dolphins are trying to go for 8-4, securing one of their first non-losing seasons in quite a bit. I don't have the exact numbers on that, but it's a game the Dolphins have to win, and I believe that they will win, and so does Paul. You can follow Paul and I on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. I'm Brian Cat NFL. Paul is Fanatic_pick on Twitter. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on